Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is another week, another episode of Time Out Podcast. What is Time Out Podcast? Well, it is a weekly podcast that focuses on sports highlights in Kenya and around the world. It's more than just the headlines. We also talk about numbers, we talk about facts, we talk about history, we talk about human interest stories and other matters related to sport. Time out is about taking that time to re-strategize, to re-energize, to rebuild, and allowing people to have a better outlook on a lot of things when it comes to sport. We have worked in sport, we've played sport, we love sport, but most importantly, we're here talking about sport. My name is Michael Kwambo, and joining me as always is Richard Wanjohi. Richie, well, it's been an eventful week. Maybe you can tell us how it has been for you.
Well, it's been an interesting one for me. I think 7 days ago we were looking at a possible resumption of some of the sporting action, but then again, as you'll see in the in today's episode, our CS decided to dash our hopes. But I think it's of one side saying one thing and another doing something else, because we saw the action over the weekend in Naivasha, and I think that was partly sort of pushed by the government efforts. But I think we ought to become more proactive and just get some of these sports, especially those ones that will have competitive national and international representation, back on our feet. But it's good to be back. I think some of the other highlights was I think the bubbles that I've had the rugby team has gotten into. I think we've also had the athletics team, which is now going to the relay championships. But basically, just some bit of activity, however lukewarm it might seem at the moment. But I think that is going progressively well, and ideally in the next few weeks, then we'll see some more action in sport.
I find it quite interesting when you said that one arm of government doesn't know what the other is doing. Of course, Mutai Kagwe saying that we need scientific evidence, scientific proof to allow sport to resume. But I think you and I both know the efforts that the guys in the sports industry have been making in terms of complying to the government regulations, but more importantly, ensuring that the athletes, their competitors, and even other stakeholders. And that for me is something that you don't cook in the kitchen. I think it's something that takes a lot of science, a lot of processes, and a lot of procedure. So those comments from Mutai Kagwe, I think a bit misplaced, but I think for you and I and for everybody else who follows sport, would love to see the resumption of sport, moving forward. And, as we talk about that, we do know that there's a number of activities which have a lot of government involvement, especially when it comes to sports organization, hosting events. We do have the Safari Rally, is going to be in June. We have the World Cup qualifiers, Harambee Stars, as well as the rugby teams. We have boxing, who are preparing for the Olympic Games, the bubble camp. We have the rugby teams as well, also preparing for the Olympic. And not to forget the Rugby Africa Batters Cup. All these sports activities happening under the cloud of COVID-19. So in light, again, of that statement, how do we go about this moving forward?
And I think we have tackled this, I think 2 or 3 episodes ago, when we said the sort of testing that our sportsmen and sportswomen have been going through since this pandemic came, and when some of the sports activities resumed. I think they have gone through more testing than anyone else in these parts of the world. And also, the activities that they do during the games, they also try and have the sportsmen or the management tested. So I think it's, as you're saying, one arm of the government saying one thing and the other saying a totally different thing. And the facts and the numbers are there. We had not gotten to double digits in terms of infections or sort of cases within the sporting fraternity. But as we are saying now, getting into the thick of things when we're going into qualifiers, a better way needs to be found. One, vaccinating the sportsmen and the management. Two, ensuring that the bubble or the sort of camps that we set up are very tightly and well controlled, because then again, you don't want outsiders, maybe visitors or even family coming in and out of these situations, and making it risky for the sportsmen and also for their own health. We've also seen a lot of these sportsmen are traveling out of the country both for individual meets and also just for team representation. I think that then sort of just makes them go into the clear that there's still enough testing beyond what we're doing here locally. Because if they're able to participate in international games or international friendlies or international invitations, then the sort of rigor or testing that we have, that's almost what we would expect here locally. But then again, as you're saying, let's get these things moving. Let's get the action going. The action got started over the weekend.
Yeah, and we did see that great rally action in Naivasha. We saw the Safari Rally preparation event, the Equator Rally, taking place at the Soisambu Ranch in Naivasha. Carl Tundo, of course, emerging first. Tej Rai was second, and Ugandan Jas Mangat coming in third. For me, I'm looking at it in terms of probably that is the way sporting events are going to go, because I feel that COVID-19 has changed the way we do things. A lot more tailor-made kind of events which are suitable for broadcast and for platforms such as television and other broadcasting platforms.
Hello, ni mitambo yangu ama ni yako?
Today I'm online, that's you. But again, like we always say, never a dull day in Africa, never a dull day in terms of internet connectivity. We're just hoping that Kenya Power doesn't disappear on us. I have been talking about the Equator Rally and the fact that Carl the Flash Tundo won it. Tej Rai came in second. The Ugandan Jas Mangat came in third. The quality of the event, obviously, a preamble of what to expect in the Safari Rally. So, one of the questions is whether these rally drivers can challenge World Rally Championship drivers when they come in. And then two, I've been talking about the way the sports have been packaged right in light of COVID-19. The fact that with no fans, we are beginning to see a lot more tailor-made content for TV, but also as a product being put out there.
It was interesting, and when we started off, sort of when I looked at what was going to happen over the weekend, I think that came by quite late. That late in the day, that there were going to be no fans allowed at the KWS Training Center in Naivasha, where the rally was taking place, and that was a bit of a party spoiler, because then a lot of Nairobians of enthusiastic motor rally drivers, or sorry, enthusiasts, were looking forward to a bit of a drive away out of town and just to go and enjoy the action there. But then again, I think it's because of the
Richie,
pandemic.
I think sound is quite low.
My sound. Yeah. Better? Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Take it from the top. So as I was saying, it was a bit of a late day announcement when the organizers indicated that there would be no fans allowed at the Naivasha KWS Training Center for the rally. And I think, as I was saying, it was a party spoiler, because a lot of enthusiastic fans were looking forward to driving out of town, because then that zone is still within the lockdown area. And just having a drive away out of town into that very scenic Rift Valley area, Soisambu, Lelewa, was going to sort of give them a teaser of what was going to happen in the Safari Rally. And again, the action is packed within the day, so a lot of there would be less commute or movement within the area. But as we saw, it was very few people, just the media and the works team, and also just the guys who were sort of mapping out the upcoming Safari Rally. But Carl Tundo just went all out, led from start to end. I think it felt like he was riding home, because I think he's very familiar with some of those trails. And also, I think his machine just didn't let him down, because a lot of drivers were complaining about the wet conditions, the sort of a bit of tricky terrain because of the rains that came by the last couple of days just before the rally started. But kudos to him. And also to the Ugandans who repped very well with Jas Mangat coming in third. For them to challenge the WRC, I think that's going to be a bit of a stretch, given what we saw over the weekend, because these are very short speed stages, and a second or two lost on the road, or with not mapping out or sharing good notes, then you just lose time as you go finishing, and a lot of this time to the millisecond. And we saw what Kina Sebastian Ogier are doing over the weekend. I think he lost the race due to a fan or someone who just got into the track and sort of made him lose his way. But as I was saying, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but hopefully we'll have a few finishers from the local scene and also from the region as well.
Now, from one form of racing to the other, let's go to the World Relay Championships, which are happening on the 1st and 2nd of May. Athletics Kenya sending a 31-man team. Or let me be politically correct and say a 31 strong team, because we also have a representation from the female gender. And USA and Jamaica in the big news, pulling out of the mixed relays, the 2x400 meter relay. Tidings for Kenya there?
I think the two contenders, US and Jamaica, anytime they're in any relay race, they are bound to be in the middle bracket. So for Kenya, that's a plus. I think we can boost our chances, given that we didn't send a team for the 4x4 men. That then opens up the space for us to either win a medal or at least be in the top three, finishing in that mixed race. But all the best to the team. I think they have put in some work. Unfortunately, they didn't put a good guy Omanyala into the team, given his controversial doping issue. But I think it would have been a good thing to have the youngster just ride with the team, and sort of just get the exposure of participating in an international meet, hopefully also just to prepare for the Olympics. But all the best to them, and hopefully we'll get a medal or two, if not the gold, in some of those races.
Yeah, now let's move to rugby, another sport that also entails the use of speed but power as well. The national teams, the Lionesses for the women and Shuja for the men, heading into the bubble at Kasarani. They are preparing for the Olympic Games. They have a number of training camps out of the country, which have been organized by Rugby Africa and World Rugby. The Lionesses will be heading to Tunisia for a solidarity camp under the auspices of Rugby Africa. They've qualified for the Olympics, but two other teams, Madagascar and Egypt, are heading to the repechage in Monaco, and they need that training. For the men's team as well, they'll be going for a similar training camp in South Africa at Stellenbosch, and it is the same for them in terms of preparation. Qualified for the Olympics, Zimbabwe and Uganda looking to qualify for the Olympics using the repechage, and of course the host South Africa just looking to fine tune themselves ahead of the Olympic Games taking place in Tokyo in July. Ample preparation, you think?
I think that's a good draft of activities for both men and women's team. I think that's commendable job being done by the rugby union. It's important that these teams sort of gel and find a way of playing together before the Olympics, because then even previously, even before the pandemic, we used to have very tight schedules where the teams are just off the circuit briefly before they get into the Olympics, and I think this situation has sort of helped them to some extent, because if you look at what will happen in South Africa and also in the US in the Invitational, they will not only be able to train, with top or high performance, training teams, but also be exposed to those teams which then they'll meet in the Olympics. Hopefully, then they'll also gain a bit of technical ability, because I think we've been sort of training them with their bodies and all that. The training regime has been quite interesting. I hope that they'll put some good effort in Kasarani as they work in the bubble.
Injury concerns. Samuel Liech is out of the Olympic Games, the ruptured Achilles tendon, and I tell you that is not something comfortable you want to endure. Question from me to you is: do you think our teams are capable of upsetting the apple cart in Tokyo and coming off with medals?
I think it's a bit far-fetched. If we had managed to sustain, sort of like a bit of more, like 3 or 4 more tournaments before the Olympics. Ideally, I would be saying that we can finish top four. But this one again, I think will be in the top six. If we push it, maybe in the top four. Medal bracket still out there.
And talking about stuff still being out there, Michael Olunga, man on fire. He's pumping in the goals for Al Duhail in the Asian Confederation of Football Champions League, which is taking place in some sort of bubble as well. It is being held in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. He's been on a rich vein of form, and do you think that he is worth his salt? That probably his quality is a tad too high for the Asian Champions League, or is he right where he should?
I think, tongue in cheek, this was a response to what Oliech had said last week, uh, admonishing him for playing in the Dubai or Arab states. I think he just needed to prove a point that he can still do what he does best, that is score goals, and coming out with a hat trick in his like second or third, or I think in his fourth or fifth game. That's something, and that's what we expect from him. And I think that rich vein of form will continue because we have seen that before. He did that in Spain, he did that in Japan. And I think he's just continuing with the same momentum. And that proves that he's worth his salt and he's worth the money that they've spent on him.
And I heard you mention Dennis Oliech there. I think we'll have to talk about it a bit as we continue with this particular podcast. But moving to matters more on home front, and we do have the CECAFA Women's Champions League taking place in July. 11 countries are participating, I believe 15 teams as well. I think, in my opinion, this is something good for women in football, for women's football in this part of the region. Is this something that can eventually grow and become a continental event worthy of being taken up by CAF and, giving exposure to our local and regional champions?
I think Sekafa has done a good job for bringing up the Women Champions League. I think it's an appreciation of what our women folk are doing, especially in sport. And I think we've seen that in rugby, and now it's slowly creeping into football. And we see the women catching up very fast, and having the ability to just pick up the sport and run with it. It's a good thing. It's commendable that Kenya hosts this tournament. Again, the sort of raft of events that we expect locally. Kudos again to the government. Hopefully, we'll not have too many controversies. Preparations for the
Which
game.
side of the government? Remember, there's one side of the government that is telling us we don't know when sport is coming back.
Yeah, so ideally we'll we'll have a good tournament, and hopefully the Kenyan team can perform as well. Not just hosting, but hosting and getting to the finals, and hopefully winning this inaugural tournament.
Now, still talking about women in sport, we have had the Confederation of African Volleyball Championships taking place in Tunisia, both for men and women. But we'll start with the women's volleyball first. And Kenya still was able to send out two teams, Kenya Prisons and Kenya Pipelines, perennial campaigners. They've won that. Pipeline, actually former winners of the championship. And they did it under extreme circumstances because the core of their players play for Malkia Strikers, which is the Kenya women's national volleyball team. Unfortunately, they are in camp in Kasarani preparing for the Olympic Games. Having said that, Pipeline and Prisons crashed out of the event. They did not win it, but I still feel that the fact that you're able to assemble teams without your core players and go out and still make a statement out there is something big. And I think for women football in Kenya, that was commendable. A lot of I can't find a word to replace sportsmanship. I'll just say it anyway. A lot of great sportsmanship exhibited by both teams, and it's unfortunate that they didn't win it. In the men's event, Kenya Ports Authority and GSU also featured in the competition. They crashed out of the quarterfinal stage. Eventually, KPA Ports Authority finishing fifth overall, while GSU finishing seventh. I think for the men as well, making it to the knockout stages is something big because in previous editions they've struggled to go beyond the group phase. One may want to say that the event was watered down by the absence of the Egyptian teams, but I still feel that anytime you have an opportunity to go out there and prove a point, go and do it.
Interesting. This is a sport that started off being a men's specialty back in the 80s and early 90s. But again, the women folk caught up, and they've been the shining stars. And as you're saying, we have the national team, the national women's team, Malkia Strikers in camp. And that said, then a lot of these teams, especially Pipeline and what's the other team, Prisons.
And presence,
Uh,
yes.
Yes, they had their core team taken away from them, but let's give it to them for making it to the quarters. I think the other Nigerians and the North Africans took advantage and said, let's get the best out of this because without your core players, then we can see and have the pride of saying that we beat the Kenyans. But also kudos to the men's team. I think they would. I felt like one of the teams would make it to the semis, but then again, I think either because of lack of enough training time and also maybe just a different environment where they were playing at. Let's hope for better success in the next championships.
European Super League. There was so much hype about it. It's yesterday's news.
I, as we were talking, and I remember when we were doing this podcast last week, you sort of put it in there. I had sort of kept it in the freezer because I felt there was something that was not coming forward, and I've been doing a story on this for some editorial work, and a lot of this was that the organizers or sort of the proponents behind the ECL. One, it seemed like it was an idea they were trying to forge before the UEFA makes the announcements on the Champions League format that they are going to have going forward from 2022 2023. Secondly, I think the team that sort of ran with that show, they had been appointed the same day. The PR agency that was running that story was appointed that same day, and this was going to be their make or break. And I think they broke because the backlash that we've seen from the fans, from the players themselves, from the football associations, UEFA, FIFA, as well as politicians, because we had Boris Johnson tweet a couple of times on sort of invoking the competitive clauses in their country. We also had Macron commend PSG for boycotting, as well as Draghi in Italy.
Fine. It may look like a stillborn idea at this point in time, but do you think they ruffled feathers? Do you think that they've caused UEFA to rethink a lot of things in terms of the way they manage their competition?
I think what they're trying to do is that just push a bit of the envelope because if you look at most of the clubs that were proposing this, the ownership style or the sort of ownership is mainly in the Americas. If you look at Arsenal, Liverpool, and Man United, the owners are sitting the American, seas. So if you look at the former days, that you have an almost certain way of running the sport, so you are assured of a certain sort of revenue. And as I was saying, I was doing the research on some of these, what has been happening is that currently a lot of teams, especially when you get into Europe, you're not very sure of what budget you'll have within the year. You're only sure of what you'll get at the end of the season, and that is so the balls are up there because you don't know, one, are you going to qualify or are you going to finish in the top four or top six or top eight depending on which league you're playing at. Secondly, if you get into Europe, are you going to go into the group stages, are you going to go to quarters, semis, or finals? So a lot of that becomes very uncertain and very unpredictable for these owners or these guys running the show behind the scenes. So this ECL was going to propose a sort of more predictable structure, because initially they were going to have about 15 teams. Then they have 5 qualifiers every season. Those 15 teams are going to be assured of qualification. So whether you finish in the top 10 or even in the 18th position, you would still be assured of playing in that league. There'd be guaranteed payments for TV rights and also other lucrative commercial deals. But then again, that's on paper. We don't know what would have actually happened once it kicks off. And then again, the kickoff date was just too soon, August 2021. I think that's the backlash that the fans looked at and they were like, you guys are not serious. You don't consult us and you just run with the show and think everything will be roses.
Interesting, interesting. And talking about roses, Man City can stop right now. They are just like a flower blooming. They won the Carabao Cup yesterday by defeating Tottenham Hotspur. Do you think Man City can go all the way and claim a treble this season?
I feel like Pep sort of has crossed the Rubicon because previously, especially in the bigger tournaments in the Champions League, they've been undone in the quarters or the semis. And this time, I think he has a very strong team, and we've seen that he's even willing to let go of Kun Aguero to the point that as you're saying, when you have a team that can get or cannot play Aguero but still win by such margins, or get to a point where they are of the Champions League, the, the it's theirs to lose. And with the pedigree that Pep has, unless he does something really drastic between now and the finals, then I think it would be um, it would be a bad loss for them, because I think the Champions League is their main trophy that they're looking at this year. Tomorrow they play PSG. Mbappe might not be playing, but then anything can happen with PSG. I think they've also gotten their guns, or they're getting into full throttle as we get into the deeper things of the UEFA Champions League. For the league, it's almost as ceremonious couple of games. I think it's theirs to take. I mean, it's a done deal with the EPL.
Talking about the EPL, Tottenham Hotspur, they lost in the Carabao Cup final to Man City. What's in it for them? Mourinho is gone. Gareth Bale obviously wants to go back to Real Madrid at the end of the loan spell. There's talk about Harry Kane actually exiting the team at the season to look for silver elsewhere. Remember, he's on the wrong side of it. He needs to win something more than the Audi Cup. So, what's in it? What's,
That is definitely coming. That is definitely coming from the red side of London, huh?
Definitely it is. So yeah, what's in it for Tottenham Hotspur? I mean, the opportunity to throw shade at them will take. Now, just getting a bit more serious, and what's in it for Spurs?
And I think this is where you look at the decision makers in a club. Why did they have to rush to get rid of Mourinho? Because Mourinho thrives in such competitions as the Carabao Cup. These tournaments where it's a one-off, and it's a very mental game. You just need to do something drastic and change the game at the spin of a button. Um, if you look at how they lost it by a single goal in the second half. That is something that I think Mourinho would have gotten tighter defenses or something would have pushed Man City. Eventually, they might have won it, but I think the Spurs team under Mourinho would have pushed them. But I think they are trying to cut their losses. But this might be a bigger loss for them, because when we no trophy to look at for another season, and even looking at what they lost out in the Europa League, the the chances of them finishing in the top six is also looking very dicey. I think it's the end of a season, and interestingly, the guy who got them there is thriving in Real in Spain. Sorry, in PSG,
Yeah.
doing great things and pushing PSG to into the semis and hopefully win the trophy.
Now, yeah, away with that talk about the EPL and the Carabao Cup. Let's get into a bit of sport business. And Serena Williams has signed a deal with Amazon for a series about her life, an autobiographical kind of thing. I think it's good. Remember, we've had conversations before about capturing history, about telling your story. And I mean, she's already built a legacy, but I do feel that this is one thing that will endure her legacy.
I think Serena is already looking into her sunset years, and as you're saying, it's a beauty that she's become very strategic in what she's doing right now. The one thing that she's trying to get to is the record of tying the Grand Slam wins, but I think that has eluded her for the last couple of tournaments, either through injury or just losing in the semis or in the finals of the respective tournaments. For her to sign a deal with Amazon, then that sort of retraces her, transition from active playing into getting into, post retirement, and also just getting some money in the bank. Because then you're looking at, her transitioning from sports into a family life, and eventually, as we're saying, into retirement and to a commercial entity. But it will be a good and interesting thing to watch. Hopefully, we'll get this in free to air or at least in pay TV sometime soon.
Knowing Kenyans, we'll find torrents and still download it, and we'll still be part of that. Remember earlier on we talked about Dennis Olier, and he did a very, I felt it was a very powerful interview on Jalash TV last week. Kudos to Jango and his team for getting that scoop of an interview, something that I feel mainstream media should have done time. I mean, days before Lango got it. Of course, there's the story that Dennis is difficult to get, but I mean, get what you want. The story was powerful. It was good to get those insights from Dennis Oliech. There's been a lot of misconceptions around him, but just listening to him talk, listening to him tell his story was powerful, and I would love to see more of that happening, not only with the likes of Dennis Oliech. There's a story obviously around Humphrey Kayande that can be told, a story around Eliud Kipchoge. And what I'm trying to do is connect all these to what Serena Williams has done, and basically what many athletes in that part of the world do. Like you said, they become strategic, they realize they're heading towards their sunset years, and when it's no longer about winning, it's about looking back and telling your story.
Yeah, I think it was a very good session that Jalango pitched to Oliet, and Oliet came, with an open heart and with a lot of disclosure. Because I remember when I looked at the timeline, I could see all sort of remarks, both positive and snide remarks. And I think, for him, it was just an outpouring of what he has gone through. One as a professional player, and also as a family man supporting his mother and also his brothers, just to bring them up to speed on their lives, and just gives a whole perspective around what we see, what we don't see about our sportsmen, because we always see them, shining there in front of us or playing games day in, day out. We forget that they're breadwinners, or just more than just breadwinners in this part of the world. You're supporting not just your immediate family, but even the larger family. And, as you're saying, these are stories that we can get, from media or content developers, and develop them for, the sake of our generation, and also just to share within these spaces, because then there is a rich vein of stories or content that we have not gotten, we have not been told. I was reading earlier today, sorry, in yesterday's Nation, the current trend that we have of Subaru drivers in Kenya was made possible by Patrick Zero in the 1980s and the 1990s. Were it not for what Patrick Zero did for Subaru, we wouldn't be talking about Subaru drivers. But you see, it has taken almost 20 plus years, and that trend is still very vibrant within the society. I would want to hear his story right now. What is he doing beyond his retirement? And then how did he manage to even get into a works team with guys from Japan?
Yeah, so I mean, there's so much power in sports. There's so much power in the kind of stories that we put out there. And once again, kudos to TV, kudos to Dennis Oliech for giving us that kind of story. And the moves that Serena Williams is making is those are the kind of moves we'd like to see happening here locally as well. And it's up to you and me as the change makers, as people who can talk about this, to actually spread that gospel and make the current crop of administrators and athletes see the value in telling their stories. Back to the Equator rally. It was held behind closed doors with no fans. I talked about this in passing earlier on the show. But is that the future of sport? Number one. Then number two, is it really that we are fighting the pandemic or controlling fans? I mean, how do we deal with sport going forward in these unique times of COVID-19?
I think this is where the sport, or sort of what happened over the weekend, comes a double-edged sword. Because on one side, you want to promote the country as a rallying destination or a rallying hub, but then on the other side, then there are no fans, or there's no audience that is going to consume this content or consume these rallies at the different areas that you're hosting this rally. I think that was a bit of a drastic measure from the organizers, but I think they also took advantage and decided that they want to close it out to the public, just to sort of control the crowds and just control the environment. Um, Ideally, we hope that will not happen in June in the Safari Rally, but seeing as it has been, I will not be surprised if they decide to close certain sections again to the public. But hopefully, we'll have the spectator stage and the fan stage in Kasarani, and I think part of Naivasha where they'll be hosting this. it also goes to the controlling of some of the content that they want to push out there. Because if you look at it, the media content that was driven, even or rather shared out by the media houses, you could tell it was very well spaced out. Not everyone sharing information as usually happens with these media houses. So that means it was a very controlled environment, both for media practitioners, for fans, and also for the drivers. Hopefully, this is just an isolated case. We wish it doesn't continue, but depending on the numbers of the pandemic and also looking at what might be pronounced in May, we hopefully get back to more rallying action with funds available.
This, Richie, was not in the script, but I probably want to mention it before the show. Some news that I think broke to the country on Friday. Alex Saba, former Kenyan player, he had a mistrial. Him and his co-accused were initially accused of rape, and basically that there's a retrial going on. And now what Alex Olaba does is hits the headlines once again, this time for attempting to murder a witness who is testifying in that case. And I mean, it's a tragedy, especially when you look at his trajectory in terms of how he grew in the game, coming from a top-ranked school, Alliance High School, getting a scholarship to play the game, getting a national team call-up, and then boom, this all explodes in your face. What can you say about the whole situation around Alex Olab?
I think I saw it in passing on Friday also. I think was it Friday or Saturday, and for me it was very tragic because I remember that whole story of the rugby players accused of the rape charges and the murder issue in Nakuru. And I think for him now to come back and sort of just add more fire add more fuel into this fire, I think that's a bit tragic because now you're becoming sort of an accomplice, or it justifies that you are supposed to be behind the bars. But that in the bigger scheme of things, tells us the sort of scenario that we are having around our sports people, both active and retired. There are no good social structures that are able to support this. So we have a lot of these people either becoming very idle or becoming depressed, using drugs and other substance abuse, and also at some point maybe engaging in crime and activities that are beyond your normal social activities. It's a bit tragic for such a player who, as you're saying, was promising action because having been in a school like Alliance and I think played for one of the clubs in Kenya, then that's not news that we want to hear, and that's something that is a bit tragic at this point.
Yeah, true. It will be tragic, and probably for anybody who's doing the research and just documenting history, probably this could be a case study on the need for those social structures, like you said, to give our athletes guidance with their life away from the field. Because, like you said, we just tend to stray, and in that stray, you end up making unfortunate moves and unfortunate decisions. Um, from that, let's I think we're coming to the tail end of the show. And what is in your crystal ball?
I think this one for me, I'll give it a pass. I didn't have a lot of action that I looked at over the weekend or over the week. I tried looking at the rally drivers that I could get some snippets on, but a lot of these were just giving very very generic information, so I couldn't get their backgrounds. So I'll give it back to you, and maybe you can look at new talent
Okay, yeah.
in the sport or in football that is rising.
Yeah, well, I happened to be away over the weekend. I was up country carrying an aunt, but as I was driving down to Nairobi yesterday, just happened to stumble on the close of the rally around Naivasha, and a name came to mind, McRae Kimathi. He's the son of Phineas Kimathi, and obviously named after Collins McRae, the
Colin
late
McRae.
Scott rally driver. He finished eighth in the Equator Rally. His after his dad is it's a commendable thing for him to literally hold his own and secure a top 10 finish is something. We just hope that, yes, we do understand rallying in Kenya is quite an expensive sport. We just hope that he's able to sustain this and become the next Patrick Njiro, and actually go ahead and influence a whole generation around the world. So that for me is my rising star in this week's edition of the Crystal Ball.
Definitely, and he steps right in and sort of helps us get into the Safari Rally thick of things, and hopefully he'll be representing the country as we'll have other drivers as well in the Safari Rally in June.
Okay, we're heading to a new week. What can we expect in the world of sport this week?
I think the big one for me is the World Rally Championships happening over the weekend on the 1st and the 2nd of May. This is will be good because Kenya is represented in most of the events there. And the relay championships are always something good for the eye and good for audiences across the world. Very short races or very engaging races, because when you see, especially the mixed races, when you have the women running against the men and one sort of outpacing the other, it makes for such adrenaline driving activity, and we can't wait for that action to happen on 1st and 2nd of May.
Wow, yeah, there is definitely a lot to look forward to both locally and internationally. But for now, it's time for us to take a timeout. It has been about 41 minutes of a great sport discourse. As always, I'm signing off. My name is Michael Kwambo, and this is
Time out. Thank you very much, Richard.